Great. Okay, afternoon everyone. I think I'm going to finish this series of presentations with something a little different. I'm basically talking to you about a project which is actually taking place in Stirling, dealing with a historical collection of personal papers which have come to the University of Stirling archives, the content of which might be of interest to this group and also to academics and universities in Malawi. So, first of all, who was Peter McCoy? Well, Terence Ranger, the noted African historian, described him as an unknown hero. And John McCracken, who wrote a history of Malawi, wrote about him and described him as one of the staunchest and most effective of the small group of Europeans who played an active part in the liberation struggles in Central Africa in the 1960s and 70s. So a very brief summary of his life. Peter McCoy, his family background was from the Stirling area. His family were from Doon. Just after he served in the British Army in the Second World War, emigrated to what was then Southern Rhodesia to become a tobacco farmer, moved into journalism, and then became a political activist and was involved in independence campaigns in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania, various other countries in the area. Stayed in Africa for the rest of his life, lived in Zimbabwe. In later years he wrote a memoir about his time in Africa and also devoted a lot of time to charitable causes and development in the area of Zimbabwe he lived in. He died in April 2013, leaving the request that his papers, which had survived several robberies in his home in Zimbabwe, should be donated to the University at Stirling. So we were really grateful to his family. His nephew travelled from London to his home in Zimbabwe to pack everything up, and then it kind of took its time to get to us in Stirling, but it eventually got there. 28 trunks and crates full of his personal papers covering his life and his working career. So the challenge for us basically was how to make this collection accessible to an international audience and make it directly available to academics and researchers who will be interested in the content of the collection. The University Archives itself, we're quite a small service. Our core functions look after the university's own archives. We have quite a mixed range of collections, so this collection wouldn't have been a priority within our existing resources. So the challenge was how to find a way to make access to this material possible. So for a first for us and also a first for the university, we went down the crowdfunding route, and we had a very successful crowdfunding campaign to raise quite a modest amount of money, but in terms of what it could provide for the archives, quite an important amount of money. So basically we were looking for money to support the digitisation of key elements of the collection and also provide a little bit of extra staff time to enable us to do that work. So we worked with the university's fundraising team. There's a number of different crowdfunding platforms out there. You're probably familiar with things like Kickstarter, but we used Crowdfunder because it's quite well used by the university and heritage sector. Another reason we used it was because the Heritage Lottery Fund had just introduced a partnership with the Crowdfunder website, providing 25% of match funding for any heritage project. So we were lucky enough to get that match funding. So as you'll see there, we raised our target of £8,000 with a little bit extra, tiny bit extra. So over the 56 days of the campaign, we had 64 separate people donate to the project, anything between £5 and £500. But so we basically met our target and were able to carry out the work that we needed to do. So just a bit about what's actually in the archive. So we've now taken everything from the crates that it arrived in and are working on cataloguing the collection. There's a really extensive collection of his correspondence, over 60 years of correspondence from when he moved to southern Rhodesia in 1948. I just put this slide with stamps up because it's nice and colourful, but also when I was growing up, when I was young, I was very briefly a stamp collector, and I was lucky enough that one of my aunties lived in Malawi in the 1980s. So I always used to love getting letters back from her because they were particularly colourful stamps for the stamp collection. But it's just an illustration of the range of correspondence that there is in the collection. Quite a comprehensive collection relating to his career as a journalist. He worked on a number of publications in the 1950s, the Rhodesian Farmer and Concord, which was the journal of the Interracial Association. Of particular interest for Malawi, he was the editor of the anti-colonial journal Soprano, and to go back to John McCracken, who wrote a history of Malawi. When he was doing his research for the book, he couldn't find any copies of this publication. And when the collection arrived at Stirling and John came and had a look at the collection, he found multiple copies of it in the archive. And not only do we have a full run of the publication, we've also got all of the production files for it as well. And this publication was published in the late 50s and early 60s. And Peter McCoy also worked on various publications around the time of independence, including this book, A Portrait of Malawi. And also all the other kind of political papers and brochures and material to do with that period of history. But one of the core elements of the collection is the photographic archive. Peter McCoy, both in his work as a journalist, but just also when he was out and about, took thousands of photographs. We have thousands of negatives. He kept them really well. They're all well indexed and ordered by him, which makes your job as an archivist much easier when you're working with stuff like this. A huge chunk of them, we have the actual photographic prints in, I think, 25 photograph albums. There's basically covering his time in Africa. These are just some images from him on safari in Kenya in 1957, but also a lot of images to do with the 1961 Nyasaland election campaign. There's some images there. There's some more here. And lots of photos of kind of well-known political figures. I probably don't need to say who's in those photos. So basically, the crowdfunding allowed us to get the photographic collection fully digitized, and we've also digitized the political journals. The next step is making them available. Now, the university doesn't have a content management system to do it ourselves, so we were working with JSTOR, who provide online resources for universities. They have a website called Struggles for Freedom, which contains a lot of digitized content for African history. The reason that we're working with JSTOR is because they also have the Access for Africa initiative, so they provide free access to their resources, including this website, to African universities. So basically, through the crowdfunding and through our work with JSTOR, we're able to provide free access to the digitized part of the collection. So that's basically where we are with the project now. There's a lot more potential. We've only digitized a tiny part of the archive. There's potential there for more digitization, and obviously there's a lot of potential there for academic use of the collection. Thanks.